Thank you, everyone. Hello, Festers. So we are gathered here today on the holiest of days, the very first day of Fest 21, when all of our friends from around the world come to our little North Central Florida college town to enjoy the greatest punk rock festival in the world, the Fest. And we are here to honor one of the great artists in Gainesville history, the one, the only, Laura Jane Grace. The key to the city is an honor that goes back for centuries to the days of castles and moats, when people would receive a literal key that they could get into the castles with. But today, it's the highest honor that a city bestows upon a person who really embodies the spirit of a city, who has done that city proud. And there is no person and no group in recent history that has done that more than Laura Jane Grace and Against Me. Now, we haven't had a key to the city in a while. It was practically retired after we gave it to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers back in 2006. And that made sense. He's a towering figure here in Gainesville, and his music is for a generation, is synonymous with the city of Gainesville. But for my generation, and for I think a lot of the generation I see out here, Gainesville is the city of hot water music, the city of Less Than Jake, and above all, the city of Against Me. It's hard to put into words what the music of Against Me meant to so many of us, how the lyrics that Laura shouted from behind an acoustic guitar touched us. Whether singing about the sad ending of a love story between her grandparents, Evelyn and James, or trying to find your place between anarchists and liberals, or rethinking your anarchist politics as you get older and you're forging new paths ahead. Laura Jane Grace's lyrics elevated the poetry of punk rock and made her, at least in my opinion, one of the greatest lyricists in the history of music. And I think all of us can remember exactly where we were in 2012 when we had heard that Rolling Stone magazine was coming out announcing that Laura Jane Grace was transitioning. It's only been 10 years, but it feels like a lifetime ago for the transgender movement. Coming out in 2012 wasn't like it was today. There were no transgender people on our televisions. Laverne Cox was an unknown person. Caitlyn Jenner was not in the news. Being transgender was not the conversation that it was today. And I remember it hit the punk rock world like a bombshell. For many of us and the people I knew, it was the first time we'd really reckoned with what it meant to be transgender. And because this music meant so much to us for so many years of our lives, it was like a family member had announced that they were transitioning. And Laura didn't ask to carry that burden. It was thrust on her, but she did it with poise and poetry, writing songs that we could all relate to about just wanting to be seen for who you are in a world that refuses to acknowledge you, about your transgender dysphoria blues. 6 months after that Rolling Stone article came out, a transgender flag was flown for the first time in a public square over San Francisco. The next year, Colorado ruled that a transgender student could use the bathroom of their gender identity. Being a pioneer is never easy, whether trying to merge folk music and punk rock together in a way that had never been seen before, or bringing anarchist themes to a post-9/11 punk world that was hesitant to them, or coming out as transgender before any public figure had before. Laura Jane Grace has always been unapologetically her, and that has been an inspiration for many of us, not just in Gainesville, but around the world. There is no artist that deserves this key to the city more than Laura Jane Grace, and we are just so honored that she could join us here today to take it.
Hey, y'all. Welcome to your City Hall Plaza. I'm so glad that you are here in your space. Thank you for coming out, and welcome to Fest Weekend, right? Also, and I would be remiss to not say this, welcome to Florida's cultural capital, Gainesville. Yeah? All right. People have asked me, why do we do a key to the city for an artist? Why do we do specifically a key to the city for this artist? And I quote them Lou Reed, who used to sing about lives being saved by rock and roll. I believe that is true. I believe music saves lives. I believe musicians who tell the truth about who they are and about how the world can be absolutely save lives. So that is why it matters to recognize artists who tell the truth and who are unafraid to do so, or at least willing to do so in the face of any fear that they might have. I'm not going to speechify much more here. Great. We got a lot of stuff. Hold on. Commissioner? Yeah, hold this one. Yeah, it's for the camera there. So this is a proclamation from the office of Mayor Harvey Ward, that's me. Whereas Laura Jane Grace moved to Gainesville, Florida in 1997 from Naples to be a part of the flourishing punk rock scene of Gainesville. And whereas Laura Jane Grace would scrawl the words "Against Me" on a self-recorded mixtape of 10 folk punk songs, a name which would go on in infamy as one of the greatest punk bands in history. And whereas Laura Jane Grace, along with Gainesville residents Kevin Mahon, Dustin Friedkin, and later James Bowman, Andrew Seward, and Warren Oakes, would fill out the roster of Against Me that made music that has become synonymous with Gainesville. And whereas Laura Jane Grace was a teenage anarchist organizing for radical causes around Gainesville, including the Civic Media Center, Food Not Bombs, and the Radical Activist Network. Do not be afraid to shout out, y'all. Whereas Against Me recorded some of the best punk rock in history in Gainesville, including Reinventing Axl Rose and Crime as Forgiven by Against Me at Golden Tone Studios under Gainesville's own No Idea Records. And whereas Laura Jane Grace has been ranked as the number 31 greatest rock singer of all time by Rolling Stone magazine, too low in my opinion. And whereas Laura Jane Grace publicly transitioned in 2012, becoming the most high-profile and visible transgender woman in America, and helping create a national conversation around gender that helped to spur the transgender rights movement of today. Now, therefore, I, Harvey L. Ward Jr., by the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Gainesville, do hereby proclaim October 27th, 2023 as Laura Jane Grace Day in the city of Gainesville, and invite all our neighbors and festers to join me in paying tribute to Gainesville's own true trans soul rebel on this first day of fest. In witness hereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the seal of the city of Gainesville on this 25th day of October, 2023. And the ceremonial key to the city.
You know, I've played shows at Common Grounds in July when the air condition was broken, and I think I'm sweating more now. Thank you. Okay, so I wrote out some things to say. I started playing guitar when I was 8 years old and never really had any doubt about what I wanted to do with my life. I always knew I wanted to be a musician and that I wanted to be in a band and tour the world. I also knew from a really young age that there was something different about me that I didn't quite understand, and this was a thing I was afraid for anyone to find out about for fear of ridicule or rejection or worse. When I was 12, my parents divorced and I moved with my mom and brother to South Florida because that's where my grandma lived, and most everyone else's grandma. As an angsty young teenager, I got into punk rock, and when you're a punk rocker living in South Florida, all directions point to Gainesville. So I dropped out of high school when I was a sophomore, and 2 years later, when I was 18, I moved to town. The music scene drew me here, but what also brought me was the community and the sense that I had found some place that I would fit in. In Gainesville, I found a community of activists and artists and total freaks and weirdos that I wanted to belong to. When I came to Gainesville with a dream of playing music, I had no idea how to actualize that dream. And if it were not for the community here, I don't think I would have ever been able to connect those dots. As it turns out, you do not need to be enrolled in UF or Santa Fe to receive a world-class education in Gainesville. I learned the true meaning of DIY and activism, how to marry music and a message through places like the Civic Media Center and people like Joe Corder. DIY does not mean do it yourself. It means it will be better if we do it together. I learned how to be a performer by going to shows and watching local bands play at places like Wayward Council and the Ark Warehouse and Common Grounds. And for the record, I did play at the original Hardback too. My education in how to make records was listening to the music that No Idea Records was putting out and then booking time with Rob McGregor at Golden Tone Studio. I learned how to tour by seeing bands like Hot Water Music and Less Than Jake do it. I learned how to work on cars and even got my GED through the Dignity Project down on Depot Road. And I had time to learn all this because of flexible employment at the top restaurant. My job checking IDs at the door was always waiting for me when I came back from the road. So Gainesville showed me the path I wanted to take, and it gave me the means. But unfortunately, that path led me away from Florida. The perspectives of distance and time taught me two final lessons. Before coming out as transgender back in 2012, one of my biggest fears was being rejected by this community. I have now learned just how misplaced my fears were. I could have never imagined a moment like this. This is so completely surreal. Lastly, I had to leave Gainesville to learn just how lucky I was to ever be here at all. What I didn't realize back then was that those years were the best of my life, and that I would never find friends and community like that which I found here in Gainesville. I've traveled the world over, and I know for certain what a truly special place Gainesville is, and I know that you all realize that too. So thank you for everything that you've taught me over the years, Gainesville. Thank you for giving me a place to belong when I was just a confused punk kid. Thank you for being a beacon of hope in Florida. Thank you for giving me a place that I always look forward to returning to. And thank you for this honor. Now let's fest.